Hello and welcome to this video lesson, which is focusing on the AQA paper, the Romeo and Juliet question, and the topic of the question is different types of conflict. Okay, a quick reminder of the assessment objectives. As with other sections on the AQA Lit exam, it's a 30-mark question divided AO1, AO2, AO3, 12, 12 and 6, plus 4 marks for SPAG. Have a little read over these descriptors here. But you should be familiar with these by now. Just a point about the AO3 context. You don't have to write a specific paragraph for context. You incorporate it into a couple of your existing points. Okay, so a typical Romeo and Juliet question will look like the following. So it says, read the following extract from Act 3, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet, then answer the question that follows. At this point in the play, Romeo fights Tybalt in revenge for Tybalt having killed Mercutio. So the first thing you do is you read that bold bit at the top because it gives you the context for the extract within the play, the wider play. And before reading the extract, then jump down to below the extract and read the actual question so that when you're reading the extract, you know what to look out for. So the question is, starting with this exchange, explain how Shakespeare presents different types of conflict in the play. And then the two bullet points focus on the first one in the extract and the second bullet point, the wider play. And both bullet points are equally weighted. So when you read the extract, you know that you've got to be looking out for conflict and different types of conflict that are presented throughout the play. Every paragraph you write must allude to conflict in some form or another. Okay, so when you're doing your revision, you can you've got the question in front of you and you can jot down some initial ideas. In the exam, every single examiner's report I've read states that students who show evidence of planning routinely secure higher marks. So you must spend 5 or 6 minutes in the exam. You've got 52 minutes to answer this question roughly, unless you've got extra time. Spend 5 or 6 of those minutes jotting down a plan for your answer. Okay, so a couple of points I can make without looking at anything in particular on the topic of conflict or different types of conflict are the following. So the entire play is built on the ancient grudge between the two families, as highlighted in the prologue or set out in the prologue. But within that we have the conflict between Tybalt and anyone from the Montague household. There's also conflict between Tybalt and his uncle, Lord Capulet, who warns him not to start trouble at the ball. He wants to start fighting the second he realises that Romeo, a sworn enemy from the Montague family, has gate-crashed the ball. But his father, Lord Capulet, not only says you will not fight now, but he says that he's actually heard good things about Romeo, and maybe Romeo's a nice, decent man and shouldn't be considered a threat or the enemy at all. But Tybalt isn't having any of that. There's also conflict between Juliet and both her parents at various stages. She seems to have a very distant, awkward relationship with her mother. The nurse seems to be in place of her mother, and her father then, in a patriarchal society, dominates. There's conflict between the young couple. Could explore conflict within gender. They're living in a patriarchal society. That's a male-dominated society. Women don't really have a voice, so we know that Juliet's mother was roughly her age when she gave birth to Juliet, and so the kind of pattern's just repeating itself. There's conflict between the young couple and everyone else. Their love is forbidden within the context of the ancient grudge, the feud between the two families, and they seem to be at odds with everybody. You could explore the attempts at efforts made to resolve the conflicts and judge whether successful or not. Friar Lawrence is kind of particular with regards to this. He seems to get good press in the play, yet he's the only adult that's in possession of most of the facts or all of the facts, and the one that possibly could have resolved this grudge in a different way a lot sooner without resulting in the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. And Juliet is conflicted when she learns that her beloved cousin has been killed by her true love, Romeo. So there's lots of different types and forms and examples of conflict throughout. So I've just jotted down a few initial notes. Now let's see if any of these can be applied to the actual question and extracts that we're focusing on now. So when you get the extract in the exam, you underline or highlight anything that relates to the question. I've just done a quick one here. this is just an example. I've scrawled my scribble over it, and you don't need to be able to read that now, because in the next screen I pick out the main points I can make. But that's just give you kind of an illustrative example of what your extract could look like after you've spent a few minutes going through it in the exam. Okay, so certainly highlight the key words in the question so you know that everything you need to write focuses on that. Okay, so based on my annotations, I could make the following points. The frequent use of should jump in here. If your membership allows, then do print out the PDFs of this PowerPoint, and you can make notes as you go along. So the frequent use of exclamation marks in Romeo's opening lines in this extract reflects how highly charged and emotionally volatile he is. The alliterative fire-eyed fury emphasises this, reinforcing how furious he is. He's out to seek revenge for the death of his closest friend, prepared to fight to the death. Either thou or I or both must go with him, when talking about Mercutio's soul, spirit, still hovering just above the earth. He's just been killed so recently, and he's promising Tybalt that either his spirit or Romeo's spirit or both spirits will be joining Mercutio quite soon. Tybalt is still defiant. He insults Romeo as a wretched boy, reflecting his own dangerous character. He's very volatile himself, Tybalt. The language is blunt. Tybalt slain, highlighting the murderous outcome. Oh, I am fortune's fool links to the theme of fate, as Romeo realises the potential consequences of what he's just done. As an audience, we perhaps realise that Romeo is somehow destined to die. Damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. Okay, so just focusing on the actual question, starting with this exchange, explain how Shakespeare presents different types of conflicts in the play. Okay, so that's the key element of the question. The examiner will be looking at how you apply your knowledge of the play along with your analytical skills to this specific question. This means that in every paragraph you will be referencing how different types of conflict are presented. How Shakespeare presents conflict in this extract. So you focus on the extract. You should identify pieces of evidence that support the points you wish to make. Look at the previous screen and my own annotations for guidance for this particular question. And then the wider play. Jot down some initial ideas about how conflict is presented elsewhere. For example, the struggles that Juliet has, both with her father and his insistence that she marry Paris, and with her new husband, who has recklessly risked their happiness in the act of killing her cousin. Explore how, within the context of their family's feud, both Romeo and Juliet appear at odds with everyone. Now jot down some quotes you think you could use in relation to these. For example, my only love sprung from my only hate, or must love a loathed enemy. Okay, it's all about conflict, and the language there is full of language of conflict. Okay, so how to structure your answer. There's two possible ways you can do this. Look, and I'll say again, your teachers could have equally valid alternatives, and if you're happy with them, you go with them. I'm just giving you a couple of other options. There's two, and from examiners' feedback I've had and the course I'm on, these are the two kind of approaches I would advocate. The first is to write 4 detailed paragraphs, 2 on the extract and 2 from the wider play. That guarantees that you're ticking the boxes with regards to fully answering the question. The second approach, which is my preferred approach, would be to write 3 detailed paragraphs where you incorporate both the extract and the wider play into each point. Okay, so I would focus more on that one, although, as I've said there on the side, just to confuse matters, I've kind of combined the 2 approaches for this question. However, one thing always remains the same. Whatever approach you take, you need to structure each paragraph so that it contains the specific elements the examiner will be looking for. So to do this, you should use the following: P to C. Now again, you might have another mnemonic from your PEAL, whatever, PEAQ. You run with it if you're happy with it. This is just my preferred suggestion. So P to C: point, evidence, technique, explanation, reader or audience impact. It's a play, so it's audience in this case, and context. Now context is only 6 marks. It doesn't need to appear in every paragraph, but don't neglect it. In a couple of your paragraphs you should be referencing context in some way. General summary of how to analyse: you link, quote, explain, subject terminology, explore the effects, and explore alternative meanings. Tentative approach. So you can pause that screen and have a little read through there properly at your leisure. Okay, examiners state that you should consider a brief introduction that kind of sums up in this case, how the theme of conflict is presented throughout and the main idea behind your response. So here's an example of an introduction you could write to this question. Conflict is a central theme throughout the play, with Shakespeare introducing the two warring families in the prologue, but also through the internal conflict that both Romeo and Juliet experience once they realise that their love is forbidden. Nice, simple, straightforward introductory paragraph. Okay, so a sample opening paragraph point with the elements identified in black just to show you where they are. You don't need to include them in your exam, and it's important to note that you don't have to have them in the same order so long as within the paragraph P to C are contained at some point. So going over the first point I could make, running on from my introduction. In this extract, we see the consequences of the ancient grudge reach its climax when Romeo avenges the death of Mercutio by killing Tybalt. So you've got to embed your evidence as well, kind of judicious selection of evidence, but also embedding it into your own analysis. Makes for a far more fluent, sophisticated, analytical response. Romeo is driven by vengeful emotion, but once Tybalt is dead, quickly comes to his senses and realises the consequences for what he has done, crying out that he is fortune's fool, the use of alliteration emphasising his frustration. Up to this point, it could be argued that he has been the innocent victim of his family's feud with the Capulets in simply falling in love with Juliet, plus commendably avoiding any fighting up to this point. But in intentionally killing Tybalt, he demonstrates a fire-eyed fury, a conscious involvement in the violence, and has to accept the punishment handed down by the prince. Fortune's fool also links to the idea presented by Shakespeare to the audience in the prologue that it doesn't matter what Romeo does himself, that fate is working against him and Juliet and their demise. Though tragic, is somehow preordained, already written in the stars. An Elizabethan audience would have little difficulty accepting this, as they believed that one's fate was decided by the stars and God. Therefore, any involvement in the conflict by Romeo was already planned for him. He was merely performing his role. But what we can say is that the warring family certainly hugely influenced Romeo and acted as a catalyst, hurtling him towards his death. Okay, so you pause the screen, have a little read through that, or if you've got the printout, make some notes on that, and you can, nick, borrow, steal any of this that you find useful. Okay, so you're looking for two more points you can make, and I've combined this one from the extract and the wider play. So the conflict between Romeo and Tybalt comes to a head in this extract. Whereas previously Romeo did not react to the insults, this time Romeo is up for the fight, warning Tybalt that Mercutio's spirit is staying for thine to keep him company. This defiance contrasts with his earlier passivity. However, it seems that passivity means like refusal to get involved in the fighting. We know the play opens with a fight scene, but Romeo's nowhere to be seen. He's moping around in the background somewhere because he's in love with Rosaline, who doesn't love him back. But he's avoiding the confrontations. However, it seems that regardless of what Romeo does, things still work out badly for him. When he didn't respond to Tybalt's insults, his best friend was killed. And now that he has, and Tybalt has been killed, Romeo would vanish forever from Verona. Links to fate and the inescapable suggestion that it is only the death of the two young lovers that would bring peace to Verona after years of feuding. And a final point you could make, conflict doesn't just exist in the external battles between members of the two warring families. Juliet also endures internal conflict, most notably when she discovers that her only love has sprung from her only fate, and she must love a loathed enemy. Must implies that she has no choice, that this love is so powerful she has to give in to it, and this causes conflict in both thought and action. She takes their situation more seriously than Romeo, who takes more risks in being caught visiting her again. The turmoil she suffers continues when she learns that her lover has killed her cousin, torn between her love for Romeo and her grief for Tybalt. Ultimately, though, it is her love for Romeo that wins this battle. She reaches out to Friar Lawrence for help. Okay, so there's quite a lot there for you to kind of fully answer this question. What have I written here? I can't remember. Okay, so if you're a member, if you're not a member, why not? Get on board, please. There are loads of videos out there for you to, on my site rather, for you to utilise. Lots on exam structure and so on, as well as just the content. If you are a member, well done, wise choice. Do remember to that you can, if there's something on the website you can't find, drop me an email and I'll get onto it as quickly as I can. And if you're a premium member, you can, have a go at answering this question and submit it to me and I'll grade it and give you plenty of feedback with how you can acquire the top grades. Okay, thank you for watching and listening, and hope to see you back on the website very soon. Best of luck in your revision. Bye now.